All right.
Everyone to Stories Across the Table podcast. I'm your co-host Steve Ramona with my absolutely incredible, infamous, wonderful co-host Bridget Cook Birch. I'm excited to have on. Let's get it going, Bridget.
Okay, let's do this. I'm not sure if you said and famous or infamous. So both,
I think
neither
both.
one are true or both are true. We'll have to see.
Yeah. Well, let me
But
do our. I forgot our gratitude. I'm all
I was
excited to
going
have
to
a
say
get
that's
started
where we
because
got to get started.
let's start with our gratitude. Let's get this kicked off with a bang. Today's gratitude is the world is a better place because you're in it. And I think that describes our guest to a T because it's just not the home, not just city, but the world's a better place because of our guest. So why don't you introduce her, Bridget?
I would be honored to. Sally Anderson is a friend of mine. She's also an incredible author. She's a scandal coach, as well as one of the best business coaches I have ever met. She can scare the pants off you, and she can also have the most tender heart and take you exactly where you need to go. Welcome, Sally. We are so excited to have you on Stories Across the Table.
I am beyond privileged to be in both of your presences today. On the back of my business card years ago, I used to have a statement that said, "It is a profound privilege to be in the presence of another human being." And that's very apt today.
Well, I'm going to buckle my pants up because I don't want to lose my pants. So thank you, Bridget.
Yeah, you better buckle up, Buttercup, because we've got quite the story coming. So, Sally, one of the things we love to do in this podcast is really, before we got on, you talked about open kimono, but we are getting down to gut level stories about people. And, you have 1,010 stories about yourself and about the world and about your work in it. But I want to ask you, to get down to like the deepest core level of story about you, that if I were to meet you on the street and you wanted to be fast friends for the whole rest of our lives, what are a couple of the things that I would simply have to know about you in order to really get to know you? Will you share that with our audience?
What a great question. Just before we do, I want to acknowledge you because you changed my life. And if there's anybody listening right now that has written a manuscript or is wanting to write a manuscript or is like me, I was never formally trained on how to write until I met you. And the biggest thing of the many things that I could say about you is the power of storytelling. And I've heard of that in the past and prior to meeting you and working with you. What you contributed in my life, both as a mentor and as a friend, I cannot put a price value on. And if anybody is wanting to experience a partnership that is world class and that is priceless, hunt this woman down because she will take you on a journey that will transform your life. So I just thought I'd start there.
I
Wow,
agree, Sally. I agree.
okay. Well, we'll have to provide your toaster at the very end, but no. Actually, thank you. It was such an honor to work with you. Just and people will understand why in just the next few minutes. So thank
Cool.
you.
Uh, of the many things that I could start with today, I thought I would start with my legacy, which is the outcome of why I've experienced the life that I have, and obviously we're going to dance in that conversation today. So I believe legacy is the most profound conversation you can facilitate with a human being on the planet. What are you doing here? What is your DNA calling you to be in the world? And there are a lot of people hurting. We are living in unprecedented times of people who are experiencing grief and or trauma. And as you know, of the people that I interviewed for my latest book, Beyond Brave, The Art of Living Courageously, 100% didn't believe that they could get beyond what it is that they had experienced. And because the entire lens of Beyond Brave is looking at the empowered aspect of grief, which I believe is a global first, it's a different take. And in the book, I share about the three core pillars to true transcendence, embracing confrontation, embracing discomfort, and embracing resistance. People want certainty, and we're living in very uncertain times. And there's so much uncertainty in the leadership landscape, uncertainty, especially post-COVID. Leaders are used to being in control. They don't know how to navigate uncertainty. All of the media and the fear that's being invoked, a lot of uncertainty, all of the evil that is happening in the world. It's too confronting, resistant, uncomfortable to acknowledge that it's actually occurring. But whilst we ignore it, it is thriving in the silence. The uncertainty for our youth, when they look at their future and look at us adults with reference to what we're doing to the planet, there's just uncertainty. And there isn't a listener on your podcast today that, we're all human. We all want some form of peace, some form of stability, and some form of certainty. And so the crux of the book really is looking at, if you're wanting to get beyond your grief and or your trauma, it's going to everything you're confronted by, resistant of, and uncomfortable with, which is the last thing anybody really wants to do, but certainty lies on the other side of that. So in the context of legacy, these are the 5 key things that are calling me to be. And I remember a time when I was writing the book with you, because I've been off the public domain for 7.5 years. We'll probably explain why that is a bit later. But you really challenged me, because I did not want to go back out into the public eye. I certainly didn't want to share anything about myself, because I didn't want the thousands of trolls and thousands of death threats to return. And that's when I had my epiphany, that literally if somebody came up to me in the street with a gun, I probably wouldn't even flinch because of all the adversity I'd already experienced. And so I had to face my mortality. Mike Moore years ago used to do documentaries on unearthing the truth in clandestine organizations, and really likened myself to what I'm being called to do, which really came as a result of writing this book. So then I went the other way, as you know, and did open kimono throughout the book. And which is why the name of the book is apt, because it is beyond brave to return to this medium. So here are my top 5. Ending all human suffering. There are solutions on the planet to the mental health epidemic, but because it doesn't fit into mainstream, and because we have Big Brother, Pharma, and the education system that wants to keep disassociation in place, people like myself are viewed as controversial. My reframe for that would be that I just care, because I have a non-drug related solution to most of the mental health bullshit that's on the market. And at the moment, it's an 80-20 ratio, 80% drug dependency and 20% maybe mindset. My goal is to flip that into 80% mindset and 20% where drugs are warranted. So instead of medicating people, is that we transform people in a way that is sustainable. So I'm one of the few coaches on the planet really focusing on the sustainability element of change. What is the point of investing money into change unless you can sustain it, which is a huge missing in the personal and professional development movement. And all of human suffering is a function of what we make things mean. Most people don't realize that they are the creator of their own suffering. And that can land like a cup of cold sick for most people. It certainly did for me when I realized that I was the one creating my own suffering, because we don't live in the now moment. We're either out in the future creating a world that's not even here yet, or we're dragging in something from the past. So the word I use in the context of faith is co-creation. I've coached everybody from every religious sect, spiritual sect, atheist sect. I honor what each individual person believes. But we have some new world problems on our doorstep, and some coming. And currently we do not have leaders who are evolved enough in their consciousness to be able to deal with those issues. And we have a lot of little boys, little girls running businesses, economies, and countries. The second is providing a non-drug related solution to most of the mental health issues that we have. I believe a lot of the solutions lie in honoring Indigenous wisdom. I believe that we need to have death literacy, grief literacy, and healing literacy within our education system, and the fact that we don't in the 21st century is just ridiculous. Hurt people hurt people. And, as you know, in the book I wrote about the million children that were displaced in Gaza that were reported. And they lost their parents, they lost their siblings, they lost their environment, completely displaced. None of those children are going to receive any form of healing. It's almost like we're creating a generation of terrorists, So I'm a stand and an advocate, as I write in the book, that it needs to be mandatory, that there's not a human being on the planet that's not going to experience death and or grief at some point in their life. And I'm a non-academic, and so I've had a lot of judgment over the years. I usually don't have anybody film what I do because what I do is quite unorthodox, but it gets results. And off the back of my own experience. And my frustration is that I have a solution. It's not the plethora of answers to everything, but part of being character assassinated, which we'll talk about at some point today, is because I'm trying to bring good into the world. And there are voices that need to be heard. And so part of the vehicle at the moment is being able to give a voice to the voiceless and safeguarding the innocent. The third is evolving leadership consciousness. So off the back of a number of my extreme adverse experiences in my life, I've been living in what I call the 5D dimension ever since. I pretty much alchemize people's pain into purpose and ferry them from the 1 to 3 dimensional constraint into the 5D and beyond. And I believe there is a sense of urgency to work with those at the highest level of leadership to ensure that they do the deep work to be able to cater for the issues that we have moving forward. I've been offered an opportunity at the United Nations next year. We're looking at what is the future of leadership because nobody's really championing that mantle. 2, how do we beachhead the corruption, because we will not have any level of change, let alone sustainable change on this planet, unless we beachhead the absolute evil and corruption. And 3, how do we deal with cancel culture? Because it's all very well to show up above the parapet, but how do you sustain showing up above the parapet and actually have your voice be heard? Because I've faced my mortality, if they want to top me while I'm doing it, then so be it, because I have completely surrendered to my faith, and the calling is bigger than I. So I live in shoes that are very confronting, resistant, and uncomfortable, and that's kind of like my new norm. The fourth is cancel culture. So I created the Scandal Coach brand off the back of my own experience, the fact that I could, excuse the expression, be able to take that fuckery of an experience and actually turn it around for good, because cancel culture is at epidemic levels and nobody's talking about it. In academia, they acknowledge that cancel culture exists, but there's no leadership development program on the planet that has cancel culture as a prerequisite within their program. And there's nobody that I know of, apart from myself, that is dealing with the identity recalibration of the leader who's at the height of the storm, that's going to psychotic dimensions in isolation. No human being should have to go through that level of vilification, targeted attack, targeted campaign. It's abhorrent what is occurring. And it's always done in silence, and a lot are humiliated to death. Since I've come out and been so vulnerable about my own experience, I have been absolutely blown away by the amount of leaders that are sharing their story. That is just shocking. I spent a year interviewing leaders all over the world who'd been character assassinated, publicly shamed and cancelled, and which is what birthed a Scandal Coach. So to me, now that I'm back out in the public domain, I believe that I am pioneering an area that is critically needed within leadership. And the fifth is the infiltrating the silence. So of the 2 areas that I believe I'm great at, which is dealing with utter chaos, dysfunction that most facilitators would run a mile from, I just find that easy. The more, it is, the better. And the second is satanic, demonic, underworld. I've been to every psychotic dimension of my own. I've come back of my own accord. Me and the devil have hung out for quite some time, and it is a very weird area to specialize in, but I've died so many times. I have faced every demonic, satanic dimension imaginable, and believe that I should either be dead, I should either be a statistic in the system, or I should be in an asylum. That's a fact. I should not be here. The fact that I am, and the fact that I have and continue to champion in what I do, there's only one reason, and that is my faith. And I believe the way in which I talk to people about faith, the fact that in every single organization on the planet, it has human beings in it. The 2 main priorities for every human being, I believe, is love and faith. Yet they aren't the 2 main strategies in every single business on the planet. The only way we're going to solve the issues on this planet is to embrace faith to a degree we never have, and get away from that bullshit around when you hear the word faith, you immediately think religion. And if you've got an issue with religion, you cancel it out. And so we don't have a conversation. It's kind of like, come on, we could, let's have a bigger conversation here. Higher power, universal force, collective consciousness, unknown, zone, slipstream, vortex. I don't care what you call it, so long as you hook into it. I talk to CEOs about, have you ever tried to vacuum when you haven't plugged it in and turned it on? It's a bit tricky, doing leadership versus being leadership. Who you are in your human form is limited. Who you are in your co-creative form is limitless. Sally Anderson going back out into the public domain, forget it. Sally Anderson co-creatively, get out of my way, because it's not about me. I'm just a conduit for the divine. So the infiltrating the silence is part of the philanthropic vision, which came through as a result of the book. Tier 1 is the pedophilia, the child trafficking, the farming of child trafficked children's organs, the baby bashing, baby killing. It's just horrid. There are many different factions out there that are doing good in those areas, but I'd like to see us setting up think tanks, not talk fest, but think tanks that actually bring people who have solutions to most of this bullshit that we're tolerating. Is that going to be controversial in the context of Big Brother Pharma and the education system? For sure. But there's power in the collective, and it's time. I believe tier 2
So
is
Sally, I'm going to interrupt you a little bit here because you've been talking about 5 huge subjects. And here's the thing that I love is I've discovered that there is light and love on a spectrum.
Yep.
And if you have lived in the dark, if you have experienced tremendous difficulty, that you actually have a predilection to hold the biggest amount of light. You have this capacity for being able to hold this if you choose it. And it takes a lot of courage. And the reason I'm interrupting you is, these are 5 big areas and capacities in the world in which you're able to hold, but the listener doesn't have any clue about who you are, where you come from, and why it is that you can hold so much.
Cool.
So would you share with us those things that you're coming out big and bold now and unafraid, so that they will be excited to get on board with you and what you're doing?
Cool. So I was born in New Zealand. My father was one of the first guidance counsellors in New Zealand. We had street kids in our house since I can ever remember. And for 20 years, I stood philanthropically for eradicating teen suicide, because our kids are dying and it's not okay. And kids at the at-risk end of the market, there's nothing really stopping the vicious cycle of recidivism, pre-prison, post-prison, or in the prison service. So I understand dysfunction. I was one of those why kids. I used to infuriate the hell out of everybody, because every time somebody tried to answer my question, it just wasn't good enough, as a little kid. I had red hair, I was white, I had freckles, and just did not fit. I lived in Canada for about 4 years when I was very young. So when I came back to New Zealand, I had the Kiwi accent, I had the Canadian accent, which just made me stand out yet again. So my self-revulsion, not just self-hatred or dislike myself, because I believe not being good enough is the fundamental belief of most human beings at the base, and we don't circumvent that in the schooling system. So well before I was 15, which I'm about to share the event that occurred, I already had issues with not being able to fit in. One being that I painted myself from top to bottom at the age of 11 with my father's wood stain paint, because I wanted to tan to be able to fit in with all of my friends. And I walked around like a bloody Martian for 3 months, because I'm talking my face, the whole 9 yards. I mean, when I look back at that little girl, all she wanted to do was fit in, Anyway, so I got my first job hiring out skis. I was a keen skier, learnt to ski on Whistler Mountain, and I was so proud of being able to get my first job. It was away from my parents. I could spend my money on what I wanted to spend it on. If you can remember back to when you had your first pay packet, it was pretty cool. In the early 80s, everybody used to hitchhike. So on my first day off, a new friend and I hitchhiked into a local township, and we shopped till we dropped. Very naive, going into the local bar, a bit rebellious. I looked a lot older than what I was. And from the minute that we stepped into the public bar, we were being cased out by a notorious gang here in New Zealand called the Mongrel Mob. My bag went missing, my girlfriend went missing, and we still don't know to this day whether she was actually involved because she has never serviced. And I walked out of the public bar and was thrown into a car with about 8 mongrel members inside. And the attack started in the car as they drove around to the mongrel mob hangout. Got a very long story short, and in no disrespect for my own story, just in the constraint of time, this can land like a news report. And sometimes the story can be a bit hard to hear. And some people think when they're listening to this story that I'm so disassociated from what it is that I'm conveying. So out of respect for the listener, because I had a mentor years ago, he said, Sally, you know, you're like a fire hydrant. You just hose the hell out of people. You leave them there like stunned mullets. You keep going, wondering why they're not with you. You're going to like leave them back here, you know. So your story is your story. My story is my story. I don't think anybody has the right to judge or compare stories because everything is relevant. But our story is our backbone of our character and how we show up in the world. So I was thrown onto a butcher's block and raped from every orifice by more than 100 gang members and left for dead, pretty much. Halfway through that experience, my soul split out because I couldn't handle the degree of attack. And in hindsight, I can see that I've been living in a different dimension ever since because I literally died on that block that day. Nobody survives an experience of that nature, and when you've gone beyond the comprehension of human terror and come back of your own accord, you kind of like learn a few things. I didn't need to go and do a psych degree. But what's extraordinary about the story is not that I survived it. What's extraordinary about the story is that I survived it with no support. So I was abducted from that location after the 10-hour ordeal, thrown into the back of a truck, 3 in the back, 2 in the front. Rapes continued on the way to the new location. Rapes continued when I got there until I lost consciousness. Found by the head of the mongrel mob in that new location. For whatever reason, he decides to drive me back to where I was from. About 7 o'clock at night, obviously beaten black and blue, hard to walk, talk, and demanded petrol money. Didn't have any money at me at the time. So I had to find the money, and so I'm standing on the side of the road and the car speeds off and I've been missing for a day and a half. I go back to where I was living. I scrubbed myself raw in a bath, completely disassociated. Got up the next day, acted like it didn't happen and went to work. Immediately the police were called, parents were called. In the early 80s, no support for the victim. How I was treated by the police and the medical fraternity was horrendous. Horrendous, and no duty of care. And what do you say to your 15-year-old daughter? My parents didn't know how to deal with it, and so I lived into 20 years of living hell. Now I've been in leadership for 37 years, so I was like a split personality. So I talk about it in the book, the movie Sybil, Sally Field. She had 16 split personalities. I reckon I had about 2,000, and I ain't joking, because it wasn't safe to be a woman, and I exuded a lot of masculinity. So I lived into a good 40 odd years of body dysmorphia. I'm 61, as of last month. So yeah, I lived into absolute hatred. Maggots would not come close, and I would physically manifest maggots on my skin, not just every now and then, like that was a daily occurrence. I lived into suicide ideation, like breath. I had every addiction known to man, always to the extreme. I, had a vicious inner critic, 24/7 high volume, couldn't turn it off. Fear and anxiety was just normal. So there's not many shoes that I sit in front of where I don't have an integral understanding of utter dysfunction. And I was a course junkie for 30 years. Name a book, a CD, a course. I read it, listened to it, went to it. But I always struggled to sustain the change. And I look at the mongrel mob now as my spiritual initiators for what I do today. That had it not have happened, I wouldn't know what I know and I wouldn't do what I do. I did a 60-minute documentary. I did 2 actually. The first one was one of the highest watched 60-minute segments of the history of 60 Minutes at the time, where I got in front of one of my perpetrators. And the key message of that documentary was the only person who loses out of the inability to forgive is the person who can't forgive. So my litmus test on forgiveness, and whether forgiveness is working, So I talk about the difference between experiential forgiveness and intellectual forgiveness. Intellectual forgiveness is when you just speak it, I've forgiven those people, but they haven't. The litmus test is if your past is not in your future at any level, that you've truly mastered forgiveness. So with intellectual forgiveness, 90% of the focus is on the event, the happening, or the perpetrator, and maybe 10% yourself, which is why people can't get beyond their past. Versus you can't do anything about the event, the happening, or the perpetrator. It happened. 90% of your focus needs to be on yourself to forgive yourself for what you did to yourself, because I became worse than the mongrel mob to myself for a good 30 odd years, to the extreme. I had to create crisis to survive, crisis to survive, crisis to survive. So the journey of forgiveness has been, and ongoingly, is part of that process. So that was one of my defining moments. My second was the character assassination that happened in 2018. So I come from a global restructure, cultural change, program portfolio, project director background. I was in New York on September the 10th, not realizing what was happening on September the 11th. I was in charge of thousands of projects. I was based in Dordrecht, accountable Rotterdam, Amsterdam, Den Haag, New York and Boston offices. I'd fly to New York on a monthly basis. Loved what I did corporately, but millions of dollars would be spent on these change programs that I'd implement, knowing they'd never get a return on their investment 3 to 5 years after I walked out the door. And to this day, organizations spend a lot of money on coaches, on consultants, on off-the-shelf training and cultural change initiatives for very questionable ROI back into the business. So I really care about people being able to not only change to the dimension that they want, but also knowing how to sustain that, and that's really where I come in. And obviously over the last 25 years, created my own education, co-creative leadership, equanimous leadership, led my own 3-day leadership retreats to high-end CEOs all around the world. I delivered over 1,000 keynotes, wrote 2 books, I had my own coach academy. But at the height of 2018, how do you describe the experience? I had somebody within my business that I trusted, who became my biggest nemesis and created hate crowds online. If you Google my name, it's not pretty. Accused of everything unimaginable. And that went global: CNN, Fox News, BBC World, and global annihilation. A lot of the focus was on the mokokoi. So in New Zealand, the indigenous culture is called the Māori culture. I was in an indigenous Māori marriage with my husband Roger, and we spent 13 years together. And he had a full facial tamoko, or full facial tattoo. So depending on what tribe you are from, men wear full facial and women wear it on the chin. It's called a mokokoa. And I received the sacred honor of this 10 years ago. All protocol was followed. It was a sacred gift authorized by Roger's family. The controversy is that I'm a white woman who received the honor of wearing this. This is about me, acknowledging me for what I've overcome, because nobody in society to this day has even acknowledged that it happened. And the simplicity of design denotes that I make transformation easy. Unbeknownst to the public, because a lot of my clientele, everything's private and confidential, I've worked for a good 3 decades with American Indian, First Nations people, Aboriginal and Māori, more so in a kind of like a mediation role, and have more respect for Indigenous cultures than I do my own. So to be accused of cultural misappropriation was saddening. I stayed silent throughout the ordeal. And 7.5 years is a long time. And imagine what it's like running a business when your reputation online, because it lives on the internet for life, is annihilated. You can't take money from people unless you tell them what lives online in every single transaction. You can't market, you can't promote, you can't sell, or you choose not to because of the fear of thousands of trolling and thousands of death threats and so forth. So the fact that I was able to navigate that 7.5 years is extraordinary. Anybody else would have topped themselves. I understand suicide ideation more than most. There's a difference between thinking about doing it versus doing it. And the only reason I never committed suicide was that my brother died when he was 23, and I couldn't put my parents through another death like that. So he really was my savior. And at the height of when it was all going down, my husband had a triple bypass, 2 strokes, a carotid artery operation to avert a 3rd stroke. So I'm trying to keep my husband alive. Let's just throw a breast cancer scare in there just at the height of it all. I'm really questioning my faith at this point because everything's in isolation. And my sister had died of breast cancer. My brother, as I said, had died of a car accident. My father had died of prostate cancer, and multiple friends had died. So I thought I knew death. And then my husband went for the Pfizer vaccine on the Friday and died by the Sunday in the middle of COVID level 4. And that's nearly 5 years ago now. When Roger died, it was a different type of experience from any other death I'd ever experienced. And I cannot articulate. And I write about it in the book that the dimension to which you love is the dimension to which you grieve. And the thing that I'm grateful for is that he died before me, because I would not want him to experience what I have to the extremity that I have. So the spiritual ascension since he died is indescribable. And here's the thing. I have taught people to trust their faith for decades. I have talked about trusting the unknown. I've talked about walking your faith versus talking your faith. It was an affront to realize the degree to which I wasn't walking my faith when Roger died. Because that was the only thing left. And the divine orchestration of God, higher power, universal force, whatever you want to call it, bringing me to my knees. Because having a deregulated nervous system, I've done 42 years of healing, and I really have compassion. How on earth do people get on who haven't had the level of training that I've had? 42 years of healing, and my body was still deregulated, obviously a lot to do with what was done to it and what I then did to it and stuff. But when you've got a deregulated nervous system, you can have as many bloody dream boards, affirmations, gratitude journals, and I'm not knocking any of that by any shape of the imagination. But when you have an unconscious driver around safety, and my entire karmic contract has been around not being supported and extreme betrayal. And it was an affront to me to realize that God was stripping me of every dimension, and I'd lost everything 3 times and reinvented 3 times, so I understood what it was like to be brought to my knees. That wasn't something unfamiliar, but this time was in a way, and I realized that I'd never actually let go. I'd never actually trusted my faith, which is where I'm at now, which is the irony. My first book is called Freefall: Living Life Beyond the Edge. My second book is called The Co-Creative Age, The Next Evolutionary Phase in Leadership. And now Beyond Brave, The Art of Living Courageously. Here I am at the age of 61, and I'm only learning truly what it means to trust, let go, and surrender in the literal sense of that. Because I know that I haven't gone through everything that I've gone through and survived it all and achieved and arrived at this juncture for nothing. And that being said, I am the most vulnerable I have ever been in my entire life. I've become this little love muffin. I'm crying all over the place because there's just nothing left. There's just nothing left. And so I know that I am protected spiritually. I know that whatever it is that I'm being called to do, it is not about Sally Anderson making those decisions. I am unconsciously competent in my co-creative ability. So, when you're a 15-year-old and you're in your car, you're unconsciously incompetent. You get in your car now, you don't even think about it. You're unconsciously competent. So I'm unconsciously competent in my co-creative ability. So I think God is pretty happy now that he is in charge versus Sally Anderson. And I'm learning what it's like to truly walk my faith.
Mm.
Beautiful. Well, we've gone way over, but it's well worth it. One question I have for you is I'm big on legacy. So you started the whole conversation with legacy. And I work with a lot of people, sounds similar to you, Sally. They don't even know what the heck that is, let alone try to build that. What would you tell people in the audience that don't know what it is?
Mm. I love the question. Most people, when they hear the word legacy, is what do you leave behind when you die?
Mhm.
And I'm not discrediting that.
No.
But my interpretation, which is what I started out with, is what is in your DNA? What is it that you're being called to do? And 9 times out of 10, a lot of people don't view what they're being called to do as something that they could surrender their life to because they don't know how to monetize it. Um, so to me, it is an innate intuitive knowing, not just a belief, a knowing. Like I know my education is meant for the military to completely circumvent the suicide rate within the military. I know I could keep going. I know the certain things that I'm meant to do on this planet as a result of what it is that I've experienced. It's a tapping into that inner knowing and that you're so for me, given the extremity of pain that I've experienced, alchemizing people's pain into purpose is my legacy. So how do you utilize your life as a vehicle? Because I believe everybody has a responsibility, whatever whatever they've learnt in their life. We all have a responsibility to heal, and we all have a responsibility to pay forward to send the elevator back down, such that you exemplify what it is that you've learnt. Because I believe everybody deserves to be supported, and everybody deserves to be able to leave people in a better space, having been, in your presence. Um,
Yeah.
mm,
And its purpose is a great word. I'm glad you mentioned that. That's the tide to legacy because you ask what their purpose is or mission. And well, let me think about as soon as I hear that, you need some work. No, not bad answer. I can tell you right now, my mission is to serve everybody I meet. Bridget knows that. I know Bridget's to transform stories, to transform people. That's her, right? Am I right about your purpose? Audience, if you don't
Absolutely.
know what that is, I suggest you reach out to our guest or find it or work towards finding it sooner than later because you don't want to wake up or be in that hospital bed going, you always hear people go, oh, God, I wish I did this. It's not that. It's what did I do to build that legacy? Not did I do something, but tied to something. I love what you said. Bridget, why don't you close us out because this has been incredible.
Yeah. Well, I want to share. I heard Mother Teresa say once, I am a little pen in the hand of a God who is writing a love letter to the world. And it completely enveloped me and inspired me since that time. But I also have to tell you, being able to work with Sally on her book in her most vulnerable, and when she talks about alchemizing the hardest things that have ever happened to you, it changed me to work with her. And I lost my mother this year, my adoptive mother, who was the one who raised me a few months ago. And now my birth mother is facing the same thing exactly in the same way as my mother. And I am looking at grief and death and trauma and other things in such a different way, Sally, because of you. Like, how can I actually use this for my benefit? How can my last moments with these people that I love be absolutely stunning in what I'm learning in being present? And how can I use the legacy that they have given to me and carry that on in alignment with my purpose and make it even more meaningful? So your book, Beyond Brave, is just that stunning. You know, most people have they'll talk about grief or overcoming trauma and certain things and certain steps. And yours is really about that magic of alchemy. So I just want to thank you for who you are, who you've been on our podcast. Listeners, please look up Sally Anderson. In fact, Sally, how can they find you?
mm. Thank you for sharing that beautiful story. I'm on LinkedIn. So I write articles every week on evolving leadership consciousness and mindset mastery. So there's quite a rich resource of free resource online. It's the only social media platform that I'm currently on. Otherwise, it's SallyAndersonInternational.com or ScandalCoach.com.
I love that.
Fantastic. And for those of you that have struggled with cancel culture and you think you are the only person on the planet and you're embarrassed or struggle with how to pick the shattered pieces of yourself back up, I just want to tell you, Sally is incredible to work with on multiple dimensions, but this is something where she has lived it, she knows it, and she comes to know you and the wholeness of what is possible for you. So, Sally, thank you for being on our show today. Listeners, we're so excited for you to be able to look her up and have more of that opportunity to see who she really is. And Steve, I want to do something. This is usually your thing, but I believe in this book so much that the first 20 people who reach out to us on our YouTube or on our website and say that they would like to get Sally's book, I will send to them for free. So please give us your information. This is one absolutely worth going for. It will change your life and it will change the whole rest of your life and your contribution. So thank you, Sally, for being on our show today. Thank you, Steve,
Amen.
for your extraordinary
You,
presence. My co-host happens to be one of the most magical people on the planet. Go ahead,
God
Steve.
bless you. And there's more. We're doing the wrong Ronco thing. We're going to give more. Yeah, I'm going to give a gift too. So if you reach out to us, I'm going to gift you as well. You'll get the book, but I'll find something that you can get because what Sally just described today is life changing. And take this podcast or any podcast. If it resonated with you because you're thinking of somebody, imagine if Sally had this podcast 20, 30 years ago. Would it have changed her life? Absolutely. I know there's a lot of people out there that this would change their life. So share this podcast out and impact others in many ways as you can. So that being said, Sally, Bridget, and I want to thank all of you for watching, and we'll see you all in the next episode of Stories Across the Table. Have a great day, everyone. God bless.